Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. Today I have a Mother's Day card, just in time for next Sunday. This card is quite easy and with a simple change of sentiment can be used for several occasions. So let's get started. I'm starting with a top bold 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card base. I'm cut a strip of raspberry cardstock to 1/2 inch by about 7 inches. As long as it extends beyond your card base, it works perfectly. Trim your overhang flush with your card base. And now we're ready to move on to make our flowers and leaves using the Flower Power die set. I cut my leaves from cilantro cardstock. If you notice, I keep my leaf dies attached so they don't get lost in my craft room, which sadly happens quite often. I cut my flowers from sugar plum and peacock cardstock. The patterned part of the flower is from the Perfectly Plaid Rainbow Petite Paper Pack. I sponge the edges on my flowers with peacock, a little sugar plum, and on the leaves I use some celery stick. I think sponging just adds a little dimension to your flowers or projects. Here I'm using a large stylus to give a little bit of a 3D effect to the flowers. It's really easy. You can use any stylus you have. Turn them over and give a little swirl in the center, and that just makes them puff up just a little bit. Continue on with the rest of your flower layers, sponging and adding dimension. Place a little bit of glue in the center of your large layer and add your patterned paper on top. For my flower centers, I use sticky note cardstock and a snowflake from the Deck to Haul stamp set using sunflower ink. Add the centers to your flowers with some liquid glue and allow to dry. To create the opening on the front of my card, I used a 4 by 5 1/2 inch panel and using a zigzag circle die, cut the opening. The opening is approximately 3/4 of an inch from the top of the card. Add foam tape to the back of your panel, remove the foam tape, and attach to your card base, pressing firmly. For my dimensional sentiment, I use the Scripty 4U die. I cut it 3 times from licorice cardstock, sprayed it with some liquid glue, and added a second layer on top. I sprayed again and added my 3rd layer. I turned it over, sprayed the back side, and added to my card front opening. I'm adding my flowers and leaves, again using liquid glue. Using liquid glue helps in positioning and it gives you just a little bit of wiggle room in case you change your mind. For my sentiment, I'm using a strip of black licorice, a sentiment from the Happy 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 stamp set. Love that set, lots of combinations. I applied some Versamark ink, stamped it, and applied some white embossing powder. I heat set that, cut one end at a slight diagonal, and and gave it a trial run on my card to see where I would like to position it. Trimmed a little excess off the left edge and applied some liquid glue again on the back. You know me, I like that little extra wiggle room when I'm using glue. I use my tweezers to help me position it. I find that always helps. And applied my sentiment. You can see the little bit of wiggle room I get there. Kind of like that. To finish my card, I'm using some crystal drops, and they dry perfectly round and clear. Just love them. Let your crystal drops dry, and your card is complete. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial today. It's a great way to use up scraps and actually have a card for many different occasions. Thanks for joining me.